For more on the story, we are now joined by Advocate Shabnam Mayet, a human rights activist. Advocate, thank you so much for joining us on The Globe. Now, does the UN report paint an accurate picture of what really happened and is happening to displaced Rohingya Muslims?
Thank you for having me on the show. Of course it does, and there are thousands of organizations on the ground. I was fortunate enough to be part of the South African women's legal team that was there in Cox's Bazar in December. And 800,000 people crossed the border since the 25th of August last year, and they're pretty much telling the same stories. Rapes and gang rapes, arson attacks, villages burnt down, helicopter gunshots, and 97% of people said that they saw their neighbors being abused by the military. So I think they're very accurate.
Now, can the Council intervene and help end the crisis?
Well, the UN Security Council must now refer the matter to the ICC. This is the first step that they can take.
In referring the matter to the ICC, Myanmar is not a party to the Rome Statute. How would that work? There's been calls of a possible tribunal that needs to be set up because they're not a party to the Rome Statute. How would that work going forward?
Well, the first issue is that Russia and China keep vetoing, decisions that are taken along with Myanmar at the Security Council level. But how it basically would work is it has to just take this forward, they look at the evidence collected, and enough lobbying should be done at that level. And of course, if they push enough, the special tribunal would have to be constituted, as has been in the past for other conflicts. And there are other ways for them to do this. Of course, they should start in the immediate, since they've put forward these names of generals, with targeted sanctions.
Now, speaking of the major generals, there's been calls for them to face what they've done in terms of the legalities of their actions, and especially because now they are in this report and have been proven. Let's speak about Aung San Suu Kyi. Could she face genocide charges as well as a leader who seemingly hasn't been able to do anything to help the Rohingya Muslims?
So the report doesn't just speak about the generals, right? It also speaks about the government itself and Aung San Suu Kyi. And they're saying that considering how her moral authority, as well as the head of the de facto head of the state, she hasn't said anything. So they're specifically looking at her, and legal teams, other legal teams in the world, one in Australia earlier this year, was looking specifically at holding her accountable, because not acting in the face of genocide is also in essence an action that you've taken.
Is the world doing enough, though, to bring the crisis to an end?
Well, I think that there's a lot more that can be done, and it's slowly picking up now with the one-year anniversary and this report coming out. But in terms of the collection of evidence, the targeted sanctions, coming before the tribunal, making the Security Council send this to the ICC. And of course, the other thing is that countries who are signatories to the Rome Statute or those that use universal jurisdiction, nothing stops them from bringing matters in their own national jurisdictions on this issue. Because when it comes to genocide, crimes against humanity and war crimes, these become the responsibility of every state in the world.
Now, Advocate, can the government and officials of Myanmar use the fact that in putting the report together, the UN Council did not manage to go into Myanmar itself and see firsthand, but these were accounts of interviewees that they spoke to and imagery of, pictures that they managed to get. Could they not be able to defend themselves using that against the council itself?
Well, sorry, the reason why it's not a proper defense is firstly, they rejected entrance of the fact-finding mission. But the other thing is it's a 100-mile border, more than a 100-mile border between Myanmar and Bangladesh. It's a very porous border. And we're not talking about one or two Rohingya who have come across the border. We're speaking about 800,000. It's difficult for 800,000 people to tell the same false narrative. So the other thing is the ICC is currently looking at the jurisdictional issue, which you mentioned earlier, and they're saying, well, Myanmar is not a state party, however, Bangladesh is. And even though the Rohingya were subject to terrible brutality in Myanmar, this forced them or displaced them because they crossed the border into Bangladesh. And since Bangladesh is the state party, this gives the ICC jurisdiction. And this is something that the pre-trial chamber is currently considering.
In terms of the council now, with the reaction and the damning report, and genocide is not a word that's used very loosely, this particular time, have they been able to prove the fact that it is genocide, what's happening in Myanmar and the Rohingya Muslims? And in terms of going forward, what's the plan of action?
Well, if you look at what the report's saying, it's saying genocidal intent. And when you look at these actions, the trying to kill off an entire part of a group or all of that group, stopping their births, the gang rapes, the mass displacement, all of these crimes looked at together create a solid case. And so the way forward, of course, most importantly, would be for this matter to go to the ICC, and the United Nations Security Council has the ability to put this there, or for a special tribunal to be constituted, because we don't want to sit in the position where we sat with Bosnia and Rwanda, and many analysts as well as UN officials are saying that the Rohingya actually fulfill the requirements that those two genocides had stated already.
I know we touched on this a bit earlier, but I'd just like to go into it, where the report finds that Aung San Suu Kyi has not used her de facto position as head of government nor her moral authority to stem or prevent the unfolding events in Rakhine. Why do we think, what is the biggest issue here? This is a Peace Prize laureate, a Nobel Peace Prize laureate. What is going wrong in terms of her fight this time around?
So the biggest problem is that all of Burma moved for her release from house arrest. Internationally, there was so much of outcry. And many of the Rohingya, of course, called for her release as well. And in the minute she was released, she literally said nothing. So the Rohingya have been suffering terrible discrimination at the hands of their government since the late 70s. Their citizenship was revoked in 1982, right? But since she's been released, massacres in 2012, in 2016, and even last year, all she's saying is, well, the military is fighting terrorism. She's saying people inside the country don't see what's happening. But the reality is, and this was in the report as well, military necessity will never justify gang rapes, burning of villages, assaulting children, and indiscriminate killing. Every reaction that the military has made has been grossly disproportionate to the threat they claim to be fighting.
Are we likely to see the trial or the court date being set at any point in time in terms of the turnaround with regards to dealing with the crisis in Myanmar?
Well, with China and Russia continuing to veto decisions, our hope can be that their minds change and enough lobbying is done. But what we can definitely hope to see very soon is a special tribunal being constituted. And this is what activists around the world are hoping for. But of course, a lot of it depends on civil society moving forward and ordinary citizens not remaining silent in the face of genocide.